According to the Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakongo, the government needs to consider tax reforms and structure it to be progressive and fair to low-income households by reducing taxes on essentials commodities and broadening the tax base. Let's just listen in.
We feel that the increases may not be progressive and are burdening the various households. We also know that too much taxation may lead to actually tax evasion, because people lose the motivation to work. So we recommend, Honorable Chairs, that we reduce taxes, especially on essential commodities, while exploring avenues to broaden the tax base. So again, this is a subject that I know will be eliciting a lot of comments.
That the question at hand in cost of living was mostly because of the very grave effects that COVID, poorer choices, and tax raises had on inflation. Or had on household incomes. So real people actually faced significant difficulties.
We thought it would only be fair if we listened to experts and professionals like yourself who can help us to crack the numbers.
So this team, this particular time we have asked you to come, is so important to us and for this country that at the tail end, we want to be able to, if possible, be of one mind to help our country.
All right, and of course, the gist of it is that the futility of the taxes that is being raised right now, this is a concern for the control of budget. A sharp surge in the cost of living triggered mainly by the unprecedented fuel costs as well. That has been some of the concerns that experts were actually and stakeholders were putting before the National Dialogue Committee. Bill Okero, you want to comment on this as well? And a small bird tells me as well that you're in the lineup next week.
We shall be listening.
We want to tune in.
No, I think it's whatever the experts said last week, of course, it's something Kenyans have been saying, especially since the issue of the tax came up in the finance bill last year, early this year. But I also think it's good that the National Dialogue team is focusing on the issue of the economy and the cost of living, because that has been one of the key things that Kenyans expected. They will look at, not jobs.
But finally, it was a battle, because they said we don't want to discuss this. This is not the preserve of
yes, but
it should be
it's
the
also
government's
instructive
business.
to note that those in the side of the government that had been saying it will never be.
It will never.
Now.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's a compromise of sorts.
Shame.
So
he's part of government.
Yeah, he has company these days. So I think it's true what the control of budget and the experts are saying is true, that taxes in this country are a disincentive to business. I'm telling you, it's becoming a major disincentive, and we've seen this in the reports that are now coming out. How much the government is losing in this sector and that sector because of the higher tax rates and so forth. So I think I was looking at some data the other day during the COVID, when the government reduced the taxes on pay-as-you-earn, on corporate taxes and others, and VAT and so forth. Incidentally, the compliance was high, and KRA ended up collecting much more taxes. They said it's one of the highest. One of the times they collected more taxes. So I think I know, but let me tell you, at the end of the day, the taxes, the craze about taxes by this government is about the debt, how to finance the debt. But unless there is a serious discussion about the debt in this country, and there's a clear strategy on how to, borrow in this country, and we're not going to resolve this problem, because we are looking at a situation where, on the one hand, the government says we want to collect taxes to avoid debt, but on the other, we are also piling up the debt. And the debts are increasing. So for me, the elephant in the room is the debt, and unless we deal with that problem as a nation, as a government, we will not be. This is not going to. You cannot finance the country. You cannot develop this country by just raising taxes and taxes. People leave this country, I tell you, and everything will go underground, and the risk is already there.
Right, and you can see there's an opinion there that the KRA Director General has actually put in the Business Daily regarding the tax amnesty. They've been able to at least make some mileage in terms of collection. Their target is almost 15 billion shillings, but right now what they've managed to collect is 4 billion shillings with the amnesty. I wonder if people have taken advantage of the amnesty. Let me just try and see what he says there on page 10 of a Business Daily. If I flip it through there, he says, there we go. He says that, just read a bit of it. The amnesty program, it says here, provides for granting of 100% waiver of all penalties and interest on principal taxes accrued up to December 31st, 2022. The amnesty commenced on the 1st September, let me just pick it up, 2023, and shall run up to June 30th, 2024. Who therefore qualifies for this amnesty? You will be eligible to enjoy the tax amnesty if you have no principal taxes owed by the KRA, but the outstanding penalties and interest for periods of up to December 31st, 2022. In this case, you will be entitled to automatic waiver of the penalties and interest related to that period and will not be required to make an amnesty application. And then we have a second level eligibility is where you have not paid all the principal taxes accrued up to December 31st, 2022. In this case, you will be required to apply for the amnesty and propose a payment plan for any outstanding principal taxes, which should be not later than June 30th. Is it working with the... When we have these amnesties, people also have calculations around it. They wonder if that is another trap, the most trap in State House that has been brought to KRA. So you walk in with, and this is another data mining of my, so I don't know how the uptake has been, but your comment as well as the...
No, the uptake is normally lower, but the whole idea is to get more people who have been evading taxes to come, to become compliant. And that's a good thing actually, because you get people who have been evading taxes to come, they comply. But I have also said before, I think even in this forum, that sometimes some of these things are done with individuals in mind. I have to be very clear. There are certain businesses, certain individuals who have to bring in some money, but the bottom line is KRA knows that there are people who have tax assessments that have been done and there are issues, and then so this amnesty is the one way of trying to arrive at a compromise and resolve some of those outstanding issues, some of those outstanding disputes. But it gives them that opportunity to get more people to comply and to bring more people on board, generally on the rather than avoid. But that's what it is, and it's there every year, but with different focus. This time I think the focus is on the penalties and all that, and if you comply you get a waiver and all that. But other times when you're bringing money from outside, they're encouraging people to bring in money, or each year they come up with specific focus on the aspects of the amnesty.
All right, good. Yes, Sakwa, just briefly before we take a short break.
Yes, I was surprised a bit that the comment on taxes, high taxes and so on, came from the control of budget. It completely surprised me.
It surprised you?
Yes. It's okay, everybody's free to express their own views, but now we have somebody who should really probably be expressing views about expenditure, excessive expenditure, the wastage, things like those that can undermine the need to keep raising taxes. So her comments as an individual, I think, were okay. She's free, of course, to say that's how she observes, but as a control of budget, I think it was not good use of airtime, so to say. Having said that...
But she's speaking the truth. And,
but the truth...
in this particular epoch of time with this administration,
she's sitting before the Senate.
We always bear it out the way it is. It doesn't really matter.
But, you're sitting before the Senate committee. You have a unique opportunity to say, we have a challenge on the size of our budgets, on the leakage.
Oh, by the way, she mentioned all that. It's just that the news clip is on.
Yes,
it can be misleading.
But this element of taxes was not within her domain. And I would hope that you would invite there the CS.
They are, Monday.
And we hope that
Treasury will be there.
He addresses it clearly. Because there are certain basic principles that one follow, and we have discussed them on this panel. It's not the span that matters, it's how it is introduced when.
So if it's not really in your domain, you cannot comment on it. You've gone there as maybe you're doubling in as a stakeholder and an expert. Yes, so as a stakeholder.
Sometimes when people come, witnesses come before these parliamentary committees, they are sort of they shake them up a bit and so on. So you try and go somewhere in direction that you think will minimize that pressure. But I don't make that a big deal. I just thought that I hope that at the end of it we shall have got views from those who hold responsibility to deal with aspects that are beginning to be problematic to many people. One of those is that the attempts, you grow the budget substantially, you seek to finance in that fiscal year at all costs with all the speed you can. And look, for example, now, one of the biggest gains of this country, that we didn't see it that way even 5 years ago, was the free education thing. People criticized, what quality, you need help, but it's been very useful, as I conclude very quickly. But now we are going back to increased cost sharing. I know people are unable to deal with 10,000 shillings a year. And now we are going back to where we might be at 20-something, 30-something. We're going to fall back again with school dropout and low school attendance.
My music is up. Time for a station break. When we circle back, of course, now we can manufacture our own or assemble our own mobile phones. But Safaricom now is asking for government subsidies, because it is not able to put out a very cheap phone that is affordable, not cheap, but affordable for Kenyans as it is right now. And so we shall be discussing that as well. And there is 111 billion shillings that the states is seeking to bail out parastatals. Should we go that way? Another question that we need to put on the table of our panelists to just also slice and dice it. You're watching Sokoni. See you on the other side of the break.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Colgate Herbal is formulated from a unique blend of natural herbs and is scientifically proven to strengthen teeth and keep gums healthy. Try Colgate Herbal, scientifically proven for strong teeth and healthy gums.
The Motindum liquid electronic device, which is every corner giving your loved ones a peaceful sleep. Together, we can fight to end malaria.
Motindum, Kenya's #1 choice.
The Club Kiboko Festival is getting better with each edition, bringing you more fun and entertainment. This November 18th, 2023, all roads will lead to the Ulinzi Sports Complex, Langata, for a fun day full of games, entertainment, competitions, and lots of giveaways. This holiday season, join us as we make new memories with friends and family. And who knows, you might even be a winner of the many prizes, including scholarships, holidays, gift hampers, and much more. What are you waiting for? Book your ticket now on ticketsasa.com for just 500 bob for kids and 300 for adults. For more information, contact Joanne on 0708 21157 or email jnyambura@standardmedia.co.ke. The Club Kiboko Festival. Miss it, miss out.
Wanichua zaidi ya wanavyonichua, wanielewa zaidi ya wanavyonielewa. Wanadamu hawanielewi, oyoyo, hawanielewi. Wanadamu hawanielewi, oyoyo, hawanielewi. Dunia iko bize, hainielewi, oyoyo, hawanielewi. Dunia ina chati, hainielewi. nimejaribu hawanielewi, wanadamu hawanielewi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tunataka kufahamu mtu ni nani. Mwanadamu ni yule ambaye ameheshimiwa na Mwenyezi Mungu. Ikiwa tutamshikanisha mwanadamu na Mwenyezi Mungu, tunakuja kumweleza huyu Mungu ni nani.
Of Toulouse, got a handy enough win here.
Big man in the middle, Fernando Mignola trying to stay relaxed.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Welcome back. You're watching Sokoni, and of course we continue with the conversation here. Right now we want to focus on the latest development on the smartphone plant that of course was shaken into place amid the price standoff. And this is Safaricom, where the Safaricom-led consortium assembling smartphones in Kenya has asked President William Ruto's administration for subsidies similar to the fertilizer program after its first set of gadgets ended up being costlier than what is currently available in the market. Safaricom, which is one of the 4 venture partners in the East African Device Assembly Kenya Limited, that is EDAC, that is assembling the gadget at its factory located in Athi River, says it will be impossible to compete with the Chinese imports without subsidies. Now, despite Dr. Ruto's promise of having the cheapest smartphones made locally, the phones assembled by EDAC are still priced higher than many other imported gadgets in the market. And that's what we want just to discuss briefly also with the panelist on this latest development. So everyone was eagerly looking forward for the smartphones, the assembling of the smartphones here in the country, but it seems the subsidies has to come through for it to be cheaper. But before I continue, did any of you wanted to comment on that issue that we had before? I think it was only Binyasi Sako. Patrick, you never commented on it, and also Dr. Shemechodo. Patrick?
Yes, I mean, my comment on the issue of taxes and this whole rise in the number of taxes and so forth is that, you know, it's you've seen these cartoons of cows which are sort of you know, down to the bones, and people are still trying to milk them. Mm-hmm. That's where we're heading, right? Until the cow is actually fat and growing, mm-hmm. you can't get any more milk out of it. Mm-hmm. And it appears that currently we are trying to do exactly that. I think that the easiest way of increasing the amount of money that the government has is to grow the economy. And in some of the, you know, some other economies in the world, they limit the growth of government spending and so forth in terms of just the recurrent expenditure to the value of the GDP, the growth of the economy. So I think in Kenya, our economy is growing, but we are spending more at a higher rate than at which the economy is growing. And I think the gurus in Treasury and all those places should really be looking at this, I think, in a more critical manner, mm-hmm. and say that we need to limit everything else to the value of the GDP. We need to grow the economy. right? And if you're going to spend money, let's spend money on growing the economy rather than on recurrent expenditure. Because if we spend money on growing the economy for the next 5 to 7 years, and we grow the economy in a good way, then we can begin to have a lot more money to spend on development, a lot of money to spend on social development, social care, and everything else. But if we don't grow the size of the cake, as you normally say, then effectively we're going to have nothing to eat. And it doesn't matter how much you try and milk companies, individuals, and everything else, you're just going to get less out of it. Perfect thing is, what people are realizing now, that the collections on the fuel subsidy have gone down. Because you increase taxes, you increase this and everything else, people are consuming less. So the prices will go to a point where people just stop consuming. And the minute people stop consuming, your taxes are gone. And the minute people stop consuming, the people who are manufacturing what we consume are going to go out of business, and this is basically a spiral on the way down. I think we need to have a hard look at really what are the costs that are needed to grow the economy and focus on that, and cut out all the other costs, including within the recurrent budget of the country.
All right. You wanted to comment briefly?
Creativity is key in this regard. We were sharing with Ambassador and them with the prospects of creativity and technology and the opportunities of what could be taxed. We pleasantly were surprised to learn that just last year, about 1 billion shillings of cryptocurrency trade took place between Ethiopia and Kenya. I think a number of us were surprised because we know that there's quite a bit of trade between Kenya and Uganda, Tanzania, but not so much with our neighboring Ethiopia. The premise is that that inflow could be grown by being creative and giving incentives. As we are talking, I know there's a Belgian high net worth individual that's in Kigali. We had a conversation, was saying, Kigali is putting up a financial center and trying to get a financial hub. I was trying to convince him that, even in Nairobi, there's a financial center coming up. If we had incentives, he's debating, do I set this fund in Kigali or in Nairobi? For me, wherever it's put is good for the country. So being creative is good. And I do know there's been a conversation, and I'm glad that the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System is going to be in town next month during the Diaspora Convention. They will be talking a bit in how do we grow the trade between us. If there is more inflow, I agree with Patrick in this regard, how do we bake the cake to be bigger so that even when people are comfortable? I think for me the key word is let there be buy-in. If there is buy-in as we tax, people will even much more willingly give, even voluntarily, without government even mining their data, for example. So let's get the public to be part of the conversation, and also let them see the value, the taxes they get, are they being well utilized?
Right,
so that they see value.
All right, let's buckle on to the bit of subsidy that Safaricom is seeking right now, following a suit of what fertilizer has done. They've realized also that it is counterproductive given the environment that particular assembly plant is operating in. Patrick Oba.
We've always said that the cost of production in this country is very high, right? And it's known. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We know it.
Of course.
Manufacturing, which is what that is. It may be assembly, but at the end of the day, it's a basic manufacturing process. They make very little here. They just bring in all the components, assemble them, and then put them into the market. Two things. One, the costs of doing manufacturing in this country are high. Secondly, you're not getting the economies of scale. And if you're not getting the economies of scale, it doesn't matter what you do, right? All these Oppos and Huawei's and everything else, I mean, they've got the economies of scale on a global basis. So when they're bringing a few into Kenya, right, that is a drop in the ocean in terms of the total number that they're doing. So if you're going to do something in country, remember that if it's going to be there, you're going to have to heavily subsidize it to say that we have a manufacturing facility in the country. It's the same thing that killed the refinery in Kenya. And that is also the same thing that you're saying, that if Uganda want to have a refinery, it's not going to actually work unless they subsidize it. And all you're saying is you need to have a feather in your cap saying that you've got a particular facility in that country. But in order to make it successful, we have to thoroughly lower the cost of production. but also lower the taxes that those guys are paying. We talked about tax earlier on. If you look at the amount of tax that is going into the components that are going in that place, the various people, the cost for the people, labor, you're talking about electricity, you're talking about water, you're talking about the transportation of items, etc., all that, it will be very, very difficult on a commercial entity standalone to actually compete with imports. So I sympathize 100%, but it's the reality across the whole country. If you're going to do something, let's do it for manufacturing in the country, not one organization.
I thought maybe some cost benefit analysis will have been done before they shake this particular plant into place. So why would we?
I would have thought so as well.
Yeah, why would they be seeking subsidy if they realize?
The cost benefit analysis may have included an expectation of a subsidy as well to help them along. But what worried me about?
No, you don't work on hope.
No.
Yeah, and expectations are, that is really working on hope.
Choice of my words, but I'm sure it was expected. But what I can say is that I look back to Kenya One initiative that was derided to extinction because Moi wanted it and his opponent said, Kenya, making a vehicle, you're wasting time. If we had gone in there, we would probably by now be producing usable cars in the region, definitely. India persisted with makes that were absolutely only used in India and Moscow. They had some links with Moscow.
The Mahindras were,
yes, but they did create manufacturing capacity in general, as it were, when competition and modernization came in and they liberalized a bit. Now India is now a formidable vehicle producer, as it was. But they had certain rules that were meant for them. The public officials in India couldn't buy anything else other than, what is that vehicle called?
Mahindra or which one?
No, it has some other name.
Which one?
Tata.
Tata maybe was the original one, yes.
Sure.
But only diplomats and others had other vehicles on the street. And if you departed, you went off with your vehicle because the cost of entering into the Indian economy was extremely high. So things can work. So even with this phone production that does not have yet economies of scale, that we are assuming that obviously it will be inferior to the higher end models being imported. But each time I go to the village, I find people are hanging on to phones to a point where the buttons have nothing written on them anymore, where the screen is sort of peeling out and they're still pushing it back and attempting to read. They're desperately wanting any form of communication. Depending on the market niche that this assembly may target, there will be some outlet. You could put it on subsidy. You can do it on a declining subsidy over time. But as we learn and get more sophisticated, we go up the technology. We'll seek partnerships with others. But you must get started. Otherwise, you're just going to be a trader for life.
You must get started. How is Ethiopia doing it?
Because I want to jump into this because Malaysia,
I will come to you.
When they started their car called Proton, which is now a major thing, they did exactly what Manyasi said. They worked with Mitsubishi to give them the drivetrain plus the basic vehicle, and they started doing value addition locally. And they did the simple things, which was the wiring harness and batteries and the upholstery. Exactly what was happening with AVA in the 80s, right? And then over time, they began to add other components. They began to create the value addition locally. So they said, now you're going to make tires here. We are going to make the panels, but you need a steel plant that can make that kind of thing. That happened over a period of about 10 to 15 years. But all governments, agencies were buying Protons. That's where you got your volume. Yeah, you got your volume by making compulsory consumption within what was in control of the government. And so here, I think that should happen. How many employees in the civil service? They all had the neon that is being made here.
Yes.
Yeah, as a compulsory phone that they have to use.
And maybe if the Nyao car was here as well.
Nyao car would have been done exactly the same way.
Instead of the Dazzlers, we just
But I support what you're saying. Generate local consumption.
The bulk, perhaps the private sector will be the first to complain about freedom of choice. when people are being compelled to buy a particular product.
No.
With a light touch. But the BAL, more importantly, I wanted to say information is power. Information is power in the sense, and I'm hoping maybe at the next session I'll probably come with Kenya's own innovation, Silk, with regard to smartphone, where borders even buy on very soft terms. I say information is power from the premise that many may not be aware. For example, today you could get very affordable flight ticket for as little as $400 one way to the US, or $800 both ways. And you could even pay it over installments, and you could use it for the next 1 year. You know, the point is, how many Kenyans know that those opportunities exist? How many Kenyans know that phones that not only assembled in Kenya, but are architected and designed by Kenyan-owned telecom engineers? So my premise was the BAL. It was good when we went into this route of coming up with an affordable smartphone. Well, for one, I was asking, I know there's been talk of Rwanda with the Marathon, maybe reputed to have been the first African smartphone. But I kept saying, no, but Silk came even before. I think more than 10,000 units have been sold in this country to the borders. But we are not making enough noise about the good products we have. I was sharing also with a former Rwandese minister last week on transition to France about M-Pesa, which is an excellent innovation, still remains a revolutionary platform. A number of my friends in the US still marvel at the fact that, you can send money on the phone. They still have not clicked it. But this former minister was saying the problem Safaricom made, and I'm hoping this is not going to be made with M-Pesa Global. M-Pesa was branded as a Kenyan product instead of an African product. And probably this is where what Patrick was saying comes in. When you talk of EAC, you are talking of maybe 300 million. When you are talking of Africa, you're talking of 1.2.4 billion market. We would have made much more. And I think we still have an opportunity. The window is fast closing. So that we propel as a Pan-African platform. But in terms of assembly and manufacturing, I think every country has to strive to promote industrialization and manufacturing at any cost. What Governor Diritu tried to do in Laikipia, in my view, is commendable. A former professor of mine in IT would tell us always that in software engineering, don't do it right, but do it. The premise is that you may not get it right the first time, but increasingly, if you keep improving, you ultimately get it right. So let's make the environment right. I think it's a good start to assemble smartphones locally. Even better, to produce the motherboard, which is the engine of the smartphone. The motherboards are now being produced here in the industrial area, manufactured by Kenyan-owned technology. But how much noise are we making about them? I keep saying, if Gearbox was a Rwandan company, if Silk was a Rwandese company, if Eclectics was a Rwandese company, they would have gone way beyond where we are, because government would have really embraced them, said, Eclectics, for example, is supporting more than 200 banks in over 20 African countries. They just got a license to do mobile money in the Gambia. It's a Kenyan-owned brand. But to what extent do we promote them? I think we have been listening to the big multinationals, which is okay. Let's keep doing that. We need both the big multinationals, but let's also work with our startups, which eventually become Kenyan-owned brand, big brands, particularly if they get involved in value addition.
But the ownership also of M-Pesa by Safaricom fully then from Vodafone is a good initiative. Because we saw Vodafone taking a big stake on it. So with that...
You're right. Actually, I was avoiding bringing that out.
Why not?
I remember 2-3 years ago when there was Smart Africa Summit in Kigali, Kenya had like the biggest pavilion. And there were companies there, the big brands, Microsoft, Safaricom, Huawei, and so on and so forth. So when I passed by, I asked the director from the Ministry of ICT then, but you have the big platform pavilion here, but where are the Kenyan companies? He said, come and see. There is Safaricom, there is Microsoft, there is HP, and so on, there is Huawei, and so on. So I said, okay, these are the Kenyan companies. The premise is that we glorify more the multinationals. It's important to know that Safaricom, even though a Kenyan brand, is significantly foreign owned. But is there anything we are doing to promote the Wananchi Onlines, the seven C's technologies, and there are many more even unheard of. This is part of why we are very keen about in aggregating some of them and availing capital to be injected in them. And there are major lions and sharks out there who are looking to come in.
Right. Bilo, will this sound like a preferential treatment that Safaricom is seeking?
Well, yes, why not? If Kenya Airways is getting it and Kenya Power and Lighting is getting it.
And we have 111 billion shillings that is set aside for bailouts.
So it's become trendy. But I think Patrick has nailed this matter. The issue is the cost of production in this country has made it difficult for industries to be competitive. You cannot talk about competitiveness. The reason why Ethiopia has launched its smartphone in 2012, it's because of the low cost of production. You can't beat them. Everything. That's why the airlines are working efficiently. Their cost of production is generally low. The power is very low. The labor cost is low. Taxation is low. In Kenya, you can't. The same government that says, let us start up this thing. What was the objective of this thing? Because if really it's about just the pride of nationality, then they have not looked at the cost of, it's going to make the cost of living even difficult, because people to own phones now, if you tell them, because the next thing that will happen, I can assure you, knowing the way our government works, is they will now start putting a tax on imported ones to discourage people from importing. Tomorrow they'll say excise duty 20% on new phones coming in from outside, just to protect this one. So the cost of living goes up for nothing. You make things very difficult for Kenyans because they can't afford this. So yes, you want to buy Kenya, build Kenya, but I think there is a way in which the government can assist people who are starting business. It used to be, by the way, it was then in law that when you are starting manufacturing, government gives incentives. That's fundamental all over the world. You incentivize investors so that they can put up this kind of things.
Tax holidays,
tax incentives and so forth. We have, for example, when we were setting up the special economic zones, been asking. It's there provided for actually in all the agreements in the law that Kenya Power, for example, charges should be very minimal for SEZs, for EPZs, and so forth. And this has not been realized because Kenya Power is a private company largely, and they say no, we're going to charge what we want. But I think unless we address the issue of taxation, the cost of energy, the cost of so many of these things, it's very difficult to remain competitive in any manufacturing enterprise, including this one. You'll only make things very expensive for Kenyans. Very difficult. This year, for example, they passed a law in the Finance Act that introduced 35% excise duty on import of wood and furniture, which people are buying furniture from China, Turkey, very cheap. All of a sudden, we have very cheap, very nice furniture in the country. They said, no, we want to encourage local production, 35% tax. So now the local production is fine, but everybody is going to cost everyone very expensive to buy furniture now. When you want to furnish your office, you want to furnish your homes, it's going to be much more expensive. I mean, you must balance the need to try and do things locally with the cost of living. I mean, to make things affordable. Affordability is critical. Otherwise, allow people that liberalization is very important. Let people be competitive. By the way, if competition was the factor, and this country's cost of production was cheaper, many people would have. Samsung would manufacture it here. Why do Americans go to China and they don't do it in Nairobi? So it's the cost of our production is high generally. So I think this. I don't know what was the objective of this, but whoever it is, I think now for us taxpayers to again subsidize Safaricom is something we can't afford. No, we can't.
A couple of things, some which Bila has actually mentioned. I recall as a young person then, in the late 50s, if you bought a Toyota, it was almost a laughing stock. It didn't look like, you need to make the journey from Nairobi, come down. And so that is what Toyota was being perceived. The reason was we thought everything Ford. What was the other products that came from the UK?
Land Rovers. Land
Rovers, that survived. But these other brands that we had,
Peugeot,
British made,
Peugeot,
and so on and so forth, were the car, so to say. It was all a part of the colonial image making that they had made. Now Toyota has completely, thrown that out. They were struggling then, but I guess their association with the US also helped to give them a new market, that the Japanese and so on. And they expanded the scope, got new technology, and but they had to be in the field. They had to be players in the field.
Correct.
To be able to take advantage of it. I would hope that an initiative like this one on the phones is taken quite seriously. And what was said a bit earlier, that every civil servant would have to end up buying what's the thing called? Neon. That should probably be the kind of thing you have. Furniture. You go to these government offices, they have exquisite imported furniture, paid for by the taxpayer. And well, some of it really looks good. But our prisons department also do produce good furniture. They could be even better if they're producing the competitive market. They will change the styles of what they do, and maybe it will be picked up and be commercialized. We must make that determination. In China, perhaps the origin from controlled economies, things that were, and Russia is also the same, I would say, things that were for the general consumer market remained taxed for a long time. But things that were going for acceptable goods produced others, industrial manufacturing or goods that will support further industrialization, remained fairly cheap. Deliberate discrimination in the market to achieve certain goals. When liberalization came, it's countries that had those controls, because they had the technological exposure, that began now to spring off. We say we were at the same time with Korea, but Korea had much better home technology than we had. I was in China in the recent, my first visit to China was in '83. That was 5 years after the liberalization program started. And I did work there every year until '88, spending 6 weeks every fall, every September into October in China. And you could see, one time there was a raging debate in '84, '85, I think it was '84, that the guy who was allowed to sell fruits outside the gate at the University of Shanghai, the one we were collaborating with, to sell fruit, had made more money in a season than the senior professors, than the scientists and other senior professors. And it was a big deal. And I was there explaining that, no, you see, for us, we're at ease. You could, this is a business person, they're operating by the rules of the market, and they will make more money than the professor who's in a fixed income. They were very concerned that the range of variation was almost 4 times. Now, of course, that changed. What kind of society, they said, shall we have if we provide incentives to this hawker, and simultaneously, by virtue of what we allow the hawker to do, we provide these incentives to our leading scientists and professors and so on.
Right.
And of course, they had lost many during the Cultural Revolution and so on. But over time, the benefits grew and other people came in, and you can't recognize the China that I saw in 80-something. I went to Shanghai and I could see the streets, but I couldn't see the hotel we had been. The skyscrapers are not 30, they are 60 stories and higher and so on. All that has changed. Beijing is the same. But you have to be in the game, you have to play it. I think we have been too much of a consumer, import-oriented society, particularly with our middle class. In the 70s, there was a time when the cheeses, for some reason, we had declined. We produced good cheese in those days and had arranged export markets even back to Europe. But we had a problem with the supply chain of the cheeses. Our sausages were really popular in many regions outside of the Commonwealth as well. But something went wrong, and now there are a lot of complaints. The question now, the jokes were, the Kenyan middle class says that they can't get a cheese that they like, or this and that, or this and that. It was a lifestyle thing of a section of society. But it wasn't involving the people that would bring the revolution that we are all looking for. My bottom line, you have to be in the field, you might muddle through, but that's the only way that you can pick up what's coming.
Right. And the cost of living keeps going up. We have middle class electricity bills up by 30% in a year. I think this is unsustainable moving forward because this is bound to be going up as well.
Let me tell you a very quick one without interrupting you.
Yes.
I was checking why I pay high bills in Nairobi and I pay at home. And at home I have my water is pumped, electricity I supply the community around me, quite a large number, part of the village, a very large part. Schools come during the dry season to collect water from me. Now, I was trying to find a way in which how I can reduce consumption to below 200
kilotons.
Yes, per month. I haven't quite succeeded. Now, of course, I'm told I have to go through a fairly high expenditure to get part of it done by solar power. But the entry cost into solar from where I am are high. So there's indeed a consumptive pattern, a consumption pattern among the middle class that puts them in a separate scale, where others might have to subsidize them or make them pay for it.
Consumption patterns?
Yes, it is.
That?
Oh, among the middle class, you probably have air conditioning because sometimes Nairobi gets hot. You have continuous heating. You have this, you have that. Those are not things that the people in Eastlands live by. So you have to pay for it.
But yeah, you can actually do your electricity auditing. People don't do their own electricity auditing to find. You have gadgets which are still have sort of neons that they're blipping all through. They consume a lot of electricity. At times they wonder what is really consuming, or maybe your charger just leaving it there. That still it's consuming electricity. We just leave it overnight. Yes, just the small things. But
that's where
I wanted just to bring out this issue that of the cost of power, because we can see farms are gravitating. Kabasid is one of them now that they've opened their own solar plant, and they're saying bye to Kenya Power. Many people, Homestead, you say you are trying to also come with the small solar farms. You trap that particular energy, store it, and for consumption. We can see water pumps as well, which are powered by solar. So in the next 10 good years as well, will we see Kenya Power also losing traction in terms of the power generation? Because we saw they've seen this threat. Even for you to import these solar panels, I read somewhere way before that it has to be approved by Kenya Power.
Yes.
Yeah? Bill Okelo, if you may remember.
Yeah. There was an outcry, I remember, a couple of years ago when they came up with that, because KPLC was trying to be a regulator. That's not really the role of
solar.
Yes, to discourage the use of but let me tell you cannot grow a nation if the electricity cost is going to be high. You can't. Let me tell you, it's all across the economy, whether it's business or home or wherever, without addressing the issue of power. And it's not like we don't have a source of cheap power. We have. Geothermal is one of the efficient, green and cheap. The question is the corruption. People have signed on to some deals. If you are in government today, you will still, by the way, the CS told Parliament a couple of months ago, CS Energy, that we want to sign on to new thermal power contracts because their new boys also have joined government. So, I mean, as long as we have that arrangement, we will not go anywhere in this country. It's madness. We have it. We have geothermal. We have geothermal. The people are ready to invest. When Indonesians came the other day, they signed on to the memorandum. You saw it. Almost, I don't know, up to $4 billion to try and go into geothermal. So you will get investors for geothermal because it's long-term, it's cheap, efficient. You put on your kisima there and on a tow engine, you supply, and you just go home and relax for the rest of your life. But nobody wants to do these things because some fellow who has just come out of the village, he wants to make a few shillings on the side. We can't survive.
Let's say from Patrick, we'll come to you.
It's opportunities globally. There are changes that are happening in this business.
Yeah.
And we are sitting here talking about, IPP, these independent power producers that we've talked about and everything else. We need to look at the bigger picture. If you look at the northern part of Europe, you look at Germany, you look at Netherlands, you look at Sweden, Norway, Finland, all those countries, they have a power pool amongst themselves. Now, the generators put their power into an exchange. It's almost an auction. And Patrick Obath has got I've got EABL, I've got Bamburi, I've got EAPC, I've got 50 companies that require 200 megawatts. I go there and tell these guys I want 200 megawatts. How much are you going to sell it to me? I've got these consumers. So I buy the power on behalf of the consumers. And then I negotiate, I've pre-negotiated that all my power will be wheeled through the infrastructure at a certain rate. It means that everybody in that ecosystem has got to be efficient and offer value. So even the wheeler, which would now be KPLC, the person who's distributing it around, right? They would be Ketraco, they're doing stuff like that now. They're beginning to sort of,
moving that.
Yeah, they're trying to sort of create two distributors. I can go to them and they can sell me the cost. It pushes them to be efficient. Our losses currently are at 23%, almost. Globally, the average is about 14. Best practice is 10.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We are way too high.
So we are almost 13% above best practice and almost 10% above average. That 10% we are paying for in our bills, the waste that is going through. So that is one aspect that we've got to look at, going to a different distribution and buying system, whereby there's not one central person buying everything else. If Patrick Obath Inc. wants to put a power plant, I go to and talk to people to buy my power, and I get into contracts. Secondly, just like computing changed from having a central computing plant to having laptops in the houses and everything else, power is going to go the same way. I think here in your premises, you got solar for this, for your own consumption, which actually offsets a little bit what you're bringing in. But the kind of power that you consume in this building can actually be fully satisfied using solar power. When you're manufacturing, solar power may not necessarily be the right one for manufacturing. So what is going to happen, you're going to get into what is called distributed power. So everybody generates their own power. And you have local grids where you sell power into the grid and it is consumed locally. So if you can imagine, say, the whole of Eastlands, or say an estate has got, all of them have got solar power. And they've also got, they've got these little wind turbines, yeah? And they're generating power, yeah, for their own consumption. That becomes the cost of building your house. You've got that as well. And then you just put so much into the system for your street lights. Do you need Kenya Power? You don't. So the world is going towards distributed generation. And one of the great things that was being talked about here was the fact that we've got a lot of the geothermal power based in Naivasha. So you have an industrial park right next to the power. So that becomes part of the industrial park, because you go to your local power and you just buy directly from the generator there. Right? And that generator then sends the surplus to the grid.
Right.
So I think if you're going to get good, cheap power, we have to completely think the model that we have in the country at the moment.
Yeah.
The aspect of local assembly and manufacture, if you permit, may require a little more emphasis. But before I do that, compliments from a friend from Paris, Weldon Korir, who is chair of the association Kenyans in France umbrella body, a security specialist. He says he never misses this program. And I'm hoping that the country takes advantage of such high skills involved in the security sector there, even as we send our teams to Haiti and all other places. Let's remember we have very fine cops here, but we also have among the diasporas the same we could utilize. In terms of assembly, manufacturing, the bulk, the country can only grow if we're able to export. Agricultural materials have been our major export as primary goods, not sufficient value addition. I've been seeing situations where people say if we only added even just 15% to what we export now as coffee, the kind of return we would get would go up like 10 times. I was watching James Mwangi, Group CEO of Equity Bank, talk about the mining sector and the natural resources we have underground. That if Africa just processed 10% of what we have, the returns would be like 15 times more of what we are getting. The point I'm trying to make, the bow, if government was to focus on creating the environment to promote local production, local assembly, even whether it's cottage industries or even the big ones, I think would go a long way. It requires a lot more attention. Currently, I think we are glossing over industrialization and manufacturing. We need to give it more emphasis. I agree with the colleagues that power is a major aspect of it. And it comes to power, of course, geothermal is one. There are other green energy aspects that we need to look at so that there's a proper energy mix. So let's create a conducive environment to promote local industries, because the only way you get foreign exchange is if you import. Some countries decide they want to export, focus on exporting services like Rwanda is doing. And of course, some of that's already happening in Kenya. But beyond services, let's also produce more goods that we not only consume, but we also export to the region and beyond.
Right. Should we be considering, or we, Ethiopia could be leading because also of the heavy capital intensive investment they made on the Grand Renaissance. Yeah? Should we consider such a project that can make such a discernible difference moving forward? Instead of having a smidges of dams here and there, we have one huge dam. I don't know what will be the source of
we can do what he's just said. What other countries have. Why don't we work as regions? If Uganda has power, if Ethiopia has got power and they are affordable, why don't you go into arrangement as an East African, they're all part of East African nations and get it? Why do you want to do another one? Why duplicate?
Right.
You can buy, and it's cheap, by the way.
We tap it from Ethiopia.
Yeah. Why don't you get it from there?
Yeah.
They said they're going to sell it. All this, they've got enough power, excess power, and they're selling it.
And Ethiopia is actually contracted Kenyan to just give them the techno of how to secure the geothermal there.
The same thing.
The same thing. Why can there be an exchange and a trade on how?
The resources are there.
The resources are there.
We are big in geothermal, right? And so we just need to expand that. GDC has got all these wells in Nakuru, whatever, and they're messing around with them. I don't know, there's some wells that were
all the way in Baringo, it's all full of that.
And whatever it is, and those Menengai ones we were talking about when I was on the board in 2011. Up to now, we don't have power from Menengai, right? Our speed is not
deliberate.
Yeah.
Yes.
That whole area, we can get geothermal very quickly. Ethiopia, their Grand Girbe Dam and all this other stuff that they've got to the Renaissance, whatever it is, those have been done in a time shorter than exploring geothermal in Menengai. Yeah? So it is the question of applying ourselves to decisions that will actually make a difference to this country.
I was just referring to the African Business, an earlier publication there, where they were talking about the geothermal here in Kenya. They're saying, indeed, Kenya first started to explore its geothermal potential as far back as the 1950s.
Yeah.
But the sector only took off from the late 1990s onwards as the country looked for a way to combat electricity supply problems stemming from an over-reliance on hydropower. Kenya now has the eighth largest geothermal production capacity in the world at around 950 megawatts. This makes up almost half the country's electricity generation. Half. Geothermal energy has the added benefits of providing a baseload power source, and the government is aiming to reach a capacity of over 1,600 megawatts through its Vision 2030 program.
That 1,600 was the target when the Jubilee government came in 2013.
2013.
You remember? They said we were going to achieve that, and everything was there at the time.
Actually 5 years.
But that's what I'm telling you. Unless we deal with the issue of integrity in this industry, we are not going to go anywhere, because every time these things come, they are being pushed back because of other interests. So this is our challenge.
There is a plan, and there's been a plan since 2008 for an East African power pool. And it was all about investment in the interconnecting distribution network, right? The one from Ethiopia has been finished before the big one to Tanzania has been done. The one to Uganda has not been upgraded from the 50s. It is now that they're beginning to upgrade the one to Uganda. If we had an interconnectivity that can bring in about 500 to 700 megawatts between each country, that is enough for us to be able to push energy in different directions. As the years go by, you begin to plan ahead. Ethiopia will probably have something close to about 15,000 megawatts of hydro within the next 15 years. So why don't we say with Ethiopia, we know you're doing that. Kenya is developing geothermal.
Yeah.
They've all got different characteristics, but they're all needed. And just interconnect. And then you have a power pool, you have brokers, you have whatever it is. We can actually make the cost of electricity go down.
Indeed.
The future is green. And green is not only geothermal here, it's also solar, wind, but also nuclear. My colleagues are being cagey about nuclear, but ultimately that's the way to go.
All right. All right, the future is green.
Nuclear is green.
Yes, it's green.
Nuclear.
Yes.
Actually, nuclear is green.
Nuclear, but if you handle the uranium nicely, right? I think that is the flip side of it.
The thing is, these were the large nuclears that were going for 2,000 megawatts, 1,500 megawatts. These days, you're getting micro, small
Micro
nuclears,
reactors,
which can do 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, and those ones are easy to install, very quick. And they're not going to be producing weapon grade material.
Thank you.
They can be controlled and stuff like that. So nuclear now is coming to a stage where it is like buying a car.
Right. Thank you. All right.
I'm glad
we're winding up. We should be getting our closing remarks.
Patrick is getting closer.
He's getting closer. We just start for your closing remarks.
Message,
Yeah, your closing remarks. By the way, Uganda will be surpassing Kenya in terms of population in 7 years. And Bishop Ole Sapit says all Kenyans should consider now bearing only till children. Do you think that we should take that particular advice moving forward?
They'll be the first ones to want more children and more contributions. I think Uganda suffered quite a lot after the first bout of HIV/AIDS. I have friends who come from villages where everybody died except young children. So there's going to be some compensation for a while. It will show through fertility numbers a bit. We should hang in where we are, but there are downsides to very small families in our settings also. I think people will fluctuate it.
All right, Bill Okero, your closing remarks.
Yeah, I think for me, in this country, our challenge is priorities. That's why when I look at the figures tabled by the controller the other day on the government will collect 70 billion next year on housing. Imagine if that kind of money went into geothermal, for instance, and everybody in this country gets cheap electricity. Even the mamambogas in Kibera and everybody, life would change. I think it is important that the government looks at priorities and some of the decisions and the policies that they're making.
All right.
The ball, as December approaches, of course, the birds will be soon coming back to roost. Next month, we have the 10th Diaspora Homecoming Convention. Hopefully, issues like food security, investing in the affordable housing sectors will be there. And I'm glad we've been pushing for a Diaspora Week. Government seems to be seriously thinking of doing that, and we hope that the second week of December will serve as a Diaspora Week, because we need to address the issue that for the first time, these remittances seem to be going down. And I think there's a lot more that we can do to turn the tables on the other side.
In 13 years, it's been going down the drain. Right. Let's hear from Patrick about closing remarks.
Mine is all about growing the cake. And I think for me, there are some very simple policy interventions that have got to be there persistently for some time for us to begin growing the economy of this country. If we don't do that, right, the issue of building houses, building roads, whatever it is and so forth, is just going to be a road to nowhere. We need to have a big economy that then supports all these items that we need to do as a country.
Right, thank you. Gentlemen, I really do appreciate your insight this morning. As always a treat having you Thursday here to just broaden our understanding on how the economy is performing as well. And we shall be looking forward to also Bill Okero on Monday. Yeah, all eyes will be on you. Make sure you represent us there or there. Pressure.
I'm not representing you.
Let public participation expand.
You'll be our ambassador there. Public participation there. Yeah. So we are making noise as President Bongo